Hello, and welcome to Access Studio. My name is Nancy Gesimondo. I'm in Long Island City, Queens today, an area with one of the highest concentrations of artist studios in New York City. I won't be meeting with one particular artist today. Instead, I invited a group of artists to share their work with you. In this episode, I'll be presenting the first segment of Under Construction, a group exhibition I curated before the pandemic broke out a year ago. In recent years, waterfront areas in Long Island City, as well as neighboring Greenpoint and Williamsburg, Brooklyn, have been rezoned and undergone massive development. There were so many construction projects going on throughout these areas that I began to notice that gentrification and construction was becoming part of the artistic zeitgeist. Under Construction examines the work of 15 artists who were compelled to find inspiration amidst rapidly changing urban landscapes. These neighborhood enclaves, once home to particular groups of people, manufacturing industries, and warehouses, have been razed and replaced by high-rise luxury condominiums with such an imposing presence that they completely transform one's sense of place. Many of the warehouses that offered affordable space for artists have bit the dust as paradise was paved. In this collection of work, we are confronted with how one comes to terms with remodeling the idea of home in dense urban environments, whether lamenting a lost view or embracing a new one. Perhaps as a way of holding on to part of the past, some of these artists have created sculptures and assemblages with salvaged remnants from demolished buildings and discarded construction materials. Others provide historical preservation through photography and painting, conveying an inherent nostalgia or a sense of wonder at the making of these massive buildings and structures.
Hi, my name is Mishka Droskozy. I'm a photographer living in Brooklyn, and today I'm going to show you a little bit of my work. Gowanus Wild is a photo book I did, exploring nature and wilderness in the industrial neighborhood of Gowanus, where I live. This first image, Spring Tangle, was shot at the end of Huntington Street on the Carroll Gardens side of the canal. Unfortunately, the tree was removed a few years ago due to cleanup work around the canal, which has been designated a federal Superfund site. They've recently blocked off the entire street, which is a shame because it was a very interesting corner of Gowanus where I shot several images for the book. This next image, Tree Shadow, was shot on 2nd Street when this lot was a boarded-up construction zone. This used to be an extremely derelict lot in Gowanus, with all kinds of abandoned truck trailers and trash, and the difference between then and now couldn't be more dramatic. As you can see now, a very large condo block was completed. However, the tree's fortunes don't seem to have improved much. You can even see the big spotlight here that casts a shadow in the photo. Finally, this image is the last one in the book, and was shot on the roof parking lot of Home Depot. I always thought of this image as sort of a concrete desert, wide open and mostly devoid of any plants or life, except for a few birds you can see here grabbing a snack at the sanitation department facility next door. There's also a really great view up here. During the pandemic lockdown, I used to come up here a lot to enjoy some fresh air and wide open space. My latest project continues to explore the Gowanus neighborhood, this time documenting industrial buildings that are being lobbied for landmark status by the Gowanus Landmarking Coalition. I decided to shoot this series on 5x7 glass plate negatives, a format contemporary with the age of the buildings, and which would have been used to photograph them at the time of their construction in the 1890s to the 1920s. Gowanus Station, as it's known, was originally built by the city as a pumping station for the Gowanus Canal in the 1920s. It has seen many uses over the years, including being the home of the Gods Only Demons motorcycle club, until getting shut down by police in a massive raid in 2017. The ASPCA building down the street, however, has been recently landmarked. It was built in 1913, at a time when horses were still widely used for transportation and often mistreated. You can still see the original granite horse drinking troughs laying on the sidewalk outside the building. Finally, this image is what remains of the SW-bound grain house, which stood on the Gowanus Canal in Red Hook. A suspicious fire was set in 2018 that gutted the interior and paved the way for its demolition by the owner, despite its possible designation for landmark status. This is a sad example of what happens when sketchy developers find a way to subvert the system and trash our local history to cash in on yet another block of luxury condo towers. I hope you enjoyed some of the images and history I shared about Gowanus today. Thanks for watching.
My name is Eleanor Schnur, and I'm an artist in Long Island City. The group of paintings that you see here basically were done about 10 years ago. I had a friend with a car. He would pick me up. We would go out all over Brooklyn looking for the wonderful old buildings that we loved. He was as much in love with them as I was, so it was no problem, and we had a great time painting. They were old industrial buildings that probably don't exist anymore. This is a painting looking at Manhattan from Brooklyn. The tip of Long Island City is in the East River in between. It still has a lot of construction material on it, which has been replaced by a 35-story glass tower. Now, I have nothing against glass towers, and the waterfront is filled with parks and glass towers, but my friend and I really miss all the old crumbly buildings that have disappeared.
I'm Tori Coles. I'm a sculptor and a painter, and I also do installations, which I sometimes bring dancers into. These sculptures, they're typical in the sense that I often use these old materials. I grew up in the country in Vermont, and there are a lot of dairy farms. It was poor. It was very evident to me how hard it was to scratch a living out of that rocky earth through the very short, warm seasons. To me, there was a beauty in it. I think it's partly because they evoke connotations of the weather and the sun and time passing, and just the struggle people had to make a constructive life for themselves, whether it was building things or milking cows, or so it reminds me of all those things. But I try to put them together through their composition or their juxtapositions, find beauty in them. This piece is just two different kinds of roofing, corrugated roofing that sort of forms a column that opposes this wonderful curved metal roofing has a rip tear in the center. Again, the patina on the roofing is, to me, it's very beautiful and subtle. This piece, again, is electrical wire, copper roofing. The spiral at the bottom is flat metal roofing. If you look at the patina on this copper roofing, that's not painted on. That's from the weather is done. That weather and use and wear has put that patina on there, and it's juxtaposed with that wonderful tangle of wire and twine on the top. Tractor tire with a fragment of reinforced concrete, chain link fence, wire, and with metal objects dangling from them. If you run your hand across those wires, all those objects start dancing around with their shadows in the background. This is a much smaller piece. It's only 6 inches tall. It's a string of nails that would go in a nail gun against corrugated copper roofing. The black piece in back and the spiral are made out of, again, flat steel roofing, and the piece in the middle is a piece of copper roofing. The beads are from some sort of flapper fabric. I think I like to take these raw, gritty materials and try to put them together in such a way that you see the beauty in them, or see the beauty in the hardships of life.
My name is Sharon Florin, and I'm a New York City painter with a studio in Long Island City. I've been here for 40 years now. It's a wonderful place in which to work. I am a born and raised New Yorker and find a lot of inspiration from my hometown in my paintings. I love the urban landscape. That's been my subject of choice for over 40 years. And I concentrate on the architecture, the buildings, architectural details, streetscapes, street scenes, reflections, the old reflecting in the new, construction, a never-ending supply of subjects. I work from photographs that I take and have been working that way for many years. My work is very realistic. I really pay attention to detail. I like getting all the little details in that usually are overlooked by a viewer. I work small, 6 by 6 inches on oil on panel, to fairly large, 40 by 60 oil on canvas. I'm an oil painter. I studied at Adelphi University on Long Island. I got my degree in fine arts. And then also studied for several years at the Art Students League in Manhattan. I started going on Saturday mornings when I was in high school and took a life drawing class and continued taking classes there in the summers and then in the evenings after I started working a day job. A wonderful place for a young artist to learn. I'm thrilled to be in this exhibit under construction, as it's such a timely subject. There's so much change in New York. There always is change, but it has really ramped up in the last, I'd say, dozen years, especially here in Long Island City, where the urban landscape has changed dramatically. I try to capture what is here today that might be gone tomorrow, as so many of the places I've painted over the years have disappeared.
My name is Audrey Gottlieb. I am a documentary photographer. I also do street photography and fine art photography, if we must define them. I live in the state of Maine. I used to live in New York, where the majority of my work was made, especially in the borough of Queens, where I documented immigration, both established and new communities. I worked for the United Nations a very long time, so my work is pretty multifaceted. It's from a lot of places, but in this show you'll see mostly Long Island City, Queens, where I had a studio for a number of years and hung with a lot of the other artists in the community and exhibited with them and learned from them. I've worked with different kinds of cameras, different films, and now digital. For this show, under construction, Nancy Gesimondo, the curator, saw a photograph that I had made in New York City, in Manhattan, actually, one day while walking down First Avenue, passing a construction site where the light was hitting the wall that had graffiti and shadows. So my work is always, it's a combination of light, shadow, color, form, and gesture. While sifting through photographs for this show, I realized that architecture plays a really big role in my work and in my life.
My name is John Elliott, and I'm an artist from Brooklyn, New York. The theme of this project, titled Under Construction, revolves around how artists remodel and adapt the idea of home in an urban environment. I often think that my paintings are about change. My process seems to evolve fairly often, as I'm frequently taking the basic elements of my painting and remixing and rebuilding them in an attempt to find new ideas. This searching for change and reimagination in my paintings seems to also lend itself to being open to adaptation in my daily life, especially during the last year. The whole world has changed dramatically in the last year. Time is a process of change, and memory is our creative attempt at making meaning out of the elementary particles of our experiences. My concept of home is where we are all constantly putting these pieces and fragments together, trying to be human and trying to make art. Home is memory, in other words. I make paintings of these elementary pieces of experience, and these paintings come out of putting these pieces together in different ways, just like memory. We are given a highly limited existence, and all we can do is try to hold on to the most important pieces of experience and try to dream them all together. My work exists in a space in between a perception of reality and the knowledge that everything I think I know is just an abstraction, that life is a vast pattern that cannot truly be decoded and can only be made whole through a creative and subjective process. In the end, time slips away before you can ever finish putting it all together. In this time of quarantine and social distance, we can take a little more time to think back through our lives, though unfortunately through the particularly anxious lens of our current situation. Change can cause anxiety, especially in a city where most of us live on the edge of survival. With some of my recent works, including the ones here, I'm looking back at my childhood imagination of the city and my night dreams of living in the city with all the lights and intrigue. They are reflections of the exhilarating feelings of alienation and anxiety that those dreams produced in me. I think I may be looking back at these feelings and visions as a way of figuring out what home means to me in this current time, in this current city. And like this city, our lives are continually under construction.
In my work, I'm investigating how settlements evolve from populations over time. The shape and structure of urban organization and design change as needs do, and I overlay elements from different sites and times in history so that they coexist simultaneously. There's a new massive industrial bridge being built near my studio in San Pedro at the Port of Los Angeles, and I began photographing its construction process once a week for a period of 2.5 years. In a way, I think all of my subject matter relates to like a nomadic perspective, this idea of moving through things, never being rooted and working in sequences or working with subjects that are fleeting or bridges that are not completed, or like once the bridge is complete, I would never actually be interested in working with, because it's not the bridge per se, it's the construction that I'm interested in. Coming to a new place gives me a new set of ideas to develop in a drawing investigation. Before I arrived at the Hermitage, I knew little about the ancient Indian burial mounds that are part of Florida's history. Reading local anthropology books in the Hermitage's library, I started to explore several that were near where I was staying. I wanted to see if there could be a visual relationship between these mounds and the bridge construction I'd already begun to work with. I began to develop this idea by drawing, collecting, and photographing, which led to the cyanotypes, a photoemulsion process that uses sunlight as the exposure to generate a deep blue color, much like a blueprint. Composing with plants and debris on the mounds and using them as stencils to block out light, the cyanotypes became the underlayer with images from the bridge superimposed on top. I'm working to layer different histories and to interweave past with present because I think this is actually how memory works. In the mind, history is out of order. If I asked you about something, you would probably start with the present tense and talk about how you're thinking about it now, and then you'd go back and forth to tell the full story. I was curious to find connections between the mounds and the bridge, to see how these two maritime sites might relate to each other visually and conceptually. And are they all at all similar? Does one mimic the other? Was the man-made structure like the fact that these all come like a star from this? Is there any relationship of that to, let's say, a plant and so on? My ultimate goal as an artist is to try to have people see things differently and hopefully change their way of perceiving. I remember receiving an email from someone describing looking out their office window one day and seeing snow falling. They said that they never looked at snow as lightness or density until after they saw a show of mine. My work doesn't need to change how you understand a specific subject, but rather my work could be a gateway to another experience. I think poetry, literature, or music have the capacity to transport. These art forms can release your mind and open channels to dig deeper or slow down. It's like when I'm reading a novel. I'm able to be inside somebody else's mind and thought patterns. It's an incredible gift to be able to do that.
Thank you for tuning in to Access Studio today. I hope you enjoyed this episode and that you'll tune in next time. If you'd like to purchase any of the artwork in this video, please see the email list at the closing credits. You can also view past episodes of Access Studio on the YouTube channel, where you can leave a comment for the artists and subscribe to the channel.